Every soft synth you open in Sonar, including Session Drummer 3, has a load step sequencer icon in the top right corner of its interface. Clicking that will open a new step sequencer pattern, which will float by default, but I can click in the top left corner of it and enable tabbing. The step sequencer is a pattern grid of rows and steps, which automatically maps out to any soft synth, including Session Drummer. You can preview a sound by mouse clicking on the row's name. The length of a step sequencer pattern can be any number of beats, and I'm going to make this pattern 8 beats long. Each beat can have any number of steps, so you can fit the pattern to an odd time signature, like 3/4, 6/4, 9/8, whatever you may be working on. I'll keep this in 4/4 for now, though. Inserting notes is pretty self-explanatory. Left mouse click on a step to insert a note, right click on a step to erase it. Left click and drag to paint notes, right click and drag to paint erase. And if you hold Control while you paint notes, it'll tie those notes together, which is great for creating bass lines. To speed things up for my hi-hat track, I'm going to use the auto-populate feature. I'll right click on the hi-hat row's name and choose Fill Every 2 Steps. Now I'm going to preview the pattern, and because Step Sequencer locks to Sonar's tempo, I can change it on the fly. Now I'm going to add a snare pattern. And I'll add a kick drum to the pattern. Now I've got a basic kick, snare, and hi-hat pattern, but the velocity and timing are the same on every step. So I'm going to open up my hi-hat row by clicking on the square next to the row's name, and I'll edit the velocity on the upbeats of my hi-hat. And of course, different velocities trigger different samples in Session Drummer, so it sounds much more realistic. Now I want to edit the timing of the entire snare row to give it a laid-back feel. To do that, I'll grab my time offset knob, tweak that to around 7, and you can hear it sitting behind the hi-hat. Or turn the time offset knob to the left to give the snare an early feel. Now it's time to add swing to the pattern. For that, I'm going to head down to my kick row and up the swing to about 63. Nice, now I've got a little groove going, but I'm not satisfied yet. I'm going to adjust the per step time offset of my kick drum to push some of these notes even farther back in the pocket. And of course, you can right click to erase the CC data and then just put it back in as needed. Now this pattern's really starting to groove, so it's time to add a snare roll and some ghost notes. To create the snare roll, I'll add 2 snare hits at the end of the pattern. Then I'll double click them to flam the hits. I'll open up the snare row and adjust the flam amount so that the flam hits are spread farther apart. Next, I'll tweak the velocity, and I've got what sounds like a pretty convincing snare roll. Now I'm going to add some ghost notes before the downbeats. And of course, I'll tweak the velocity. Next, I need to make these ghost notes groove like the kick drum. So what I'll do is adjust the time offset of just the ghost notes. This kind of groove manipulation is really what you find in classic hardware sampling drum machines. But I don't have to connect and sync a hardware device because the step sequencer patterns live in my track view just like every other audio and MIDI clip. So I'll move my clip to measure 1 and repeat it for 16 bars. And I'm going to create a loop point from the selection. Now I'm set up and ready to work in the track view, but what if I want to go back and edit my step sequencer pattern? Let's say maybe sometime after the step sequencer view is closed. It's so easy. All you have to do is double-click the step sequencer clip, and it will automatically open up the pattern in the step sequencer editor. Now I'm going to show you my personal secret weapon for arranging drums in Sonar, which is the track layers feature. First, I'll right-click in the track separator and click on Show Layers. I'll right-click there again, this time choosing to insert a layer. And now I have 2 layers in one MIDI track. It's kind of like having 2 tracks in one, and it's awesome for arrangement. Now I'm going to fit content to resize the contents of the clip so I can better see it down the road. You're probably wondering what exactly I'm going to use this second layer for, and the answer to that question is a crash cymbal. So I'll create a new step sequencer pattern. I'm going to click the insert row icon to add the crash row and drop a crash cymbal right on the one. Now I'll drag my newly formed cymbal pattern to the second row, and instead of rolling it out and repeating it, I'm going to copy and paste it so that it hits on every other repetition of our main pattern. Now I'm going to create a change up or a break in the pattern, something like a middle 8. So I'll insert a third row. And I think I'll have this pattern start at measure 9. I'll create another step sequencer clip and insert new rows. This pattern's going to be a ride cymbal pattern. There's my ride bell and my ride cymbal. I'll make this pattern 8 beats, and I'll auto-populate the ride cymbal every 2 steps, just like we did with the hi-hat. I'm going to throw in some ride bells, say every 4 steps here. And I'll throw in some grace notes too on the ride cymbal pattern. I'm also going to adjust the velocity. Tweak those just a little bit. And I'll add some swing to the entire row. To arrange my rides, I'll drag the pattern down to the third row and roll it out to repeat it 2 times. Typically, hi-hats and ride cymbals don't play at the same time, so I need to fix that. I'm going to slip edit the end of my main clip, bring that into measure 9, and copy and paste it over to create a second clip. Copied step sequencer clips are linked by default, so when I make a change in this clip, it gets reflected in that clip. Because I want my new clip to be a unique variation, I'm going to right-click on it and choose Unlink Step Sequencer Clips. Then I'll double-click on my new pattern and mute the hi-hat row. Next, I'll trim the muted hi-hat clip to match the length of the rides. And I'll copy and paste over the original clip to flesh out the rest of the pattern. Next, I'm going to add a tom-tom fill leading into the ride section and also leading out of the ride section. So I'll insert a 4th track layer and create a new step sequencer pattern. And I'll add a couple more rows so that my high tom appears. There it is. There's my mid and my low tom. And I'm going to grab the handle on the high tom row just to drag it down so it's next to the other toms. I'll throw a couple of steps in. I'll flam the first tom hit. And I want this tom fill to swing. So I'll change all 3 rows' swing amount at the same time by grabbing the handle on one row, dragging down to multi-select. And now when I adjust the swing in my high tom row, the same adjustment will take place in my other tom rows. Now that my tom fill pattern is ready, I'll drag the clip down to the 4th track lane and copy and paste it over. And I'm going to do a little slip editing on my main clip. I'll pull that in just a little bit. Then I'll hold down Control to multi-select my main clip and my rides clip to trim them simultaneously.